Welcome to the Sharp Way Show. A little bit late this evening, a little bit past 9 p.m. on East Coast, and it's not Monday. Well, why in the world would I drag you away from Netflix? Why would I drag you out of your bed, you lazy bums? Why would I do that on a Tuesday night and not a Monday night? Why? Because I have a very special show for you. I have a show today about a couple of things. Free speech on campuses, but we're going to go deeper. For those of you who tuned in, you're going to get an extra special treat. We're going to talk about what's happening in New York City and hate crime laws on top of it. And when it comes to stuff like this, I brought the best guest of all the guests to come. That's why it's 9 p.m. So be happy what I've done to you. He is the man himself, the man who's been on TV, radio, all over the place, who fights the law and wins. This is the guy who does this. He is a defense attorney extraordinaire and a personal friend of mine, the man himself, Vinoo Varghese. How are you, sir?
Hey, Larry. Great to see you. I'm doing great.
Awesome. Glad to have you here. The first thing I want to bring up here is a lot of people are seeing that with the conflict or war, whatever you want to call in Israel, Gaza, I think it's a war, but some people call it a conflict, whatever you want to call it, the violence that is over there is, man, people have taken sides hardcore. Like you are pro this, pro that, anti this, anti that. And now what's happened is you're going on campuses. And it used to be when you're on campus, people protest all types of things. Now there is a move on campuses to sanction college students who are talking anything anti-Israel, I guess, in this case, and to put them on a permanent record and to sanction them. Now, you've got to have a view on this.
I do. I think look, this is as complicated as an issue as it can get. At the same time, it's also simple. Like on one side, you can look at it and go, well, if you're going to speak out loud, then you have to deal with the consequences of that, whatever that may be. So 100%. For the students that signed on to different petitions, what happened at Harvard with all these student groups, and it's happened at some other schools. Well, the problem with those organizations is that they ended up, a small group ended up speaking for the rest of the student body. And all these other people did not want to be brought into this, right? So you have this going on campus, but you have it played out all over the country. I mean, you have a lawyer,
But hold on. Didn't these kids, to be forward, while I agree with you, there was a small group of people who wanted to speak for this other group, but didn't these kids sign it? I mean, aren't they even though I might have said, hey, let's, stick it to Israel or whatever I thought, right? But then I said, hey, Vin, do me a favor, sign this thing. We're going to stick it to Israel. And you didn't go, no. You went, yeah, I'll sign it.
Some people, sure, some students may have, but my understanding is that the organizations signed on to this statement, right? So this is the problem. I see it. Okay. It wasn't individual students. At least there were maybe some individual students who took the lead and were more vocal, and the certain jobs were thinking, or certain companies were talking about rescinding offers and things like this, particularly when it came to some people in law schools. But I think the problem that you have is, does an organization, when I was at college at NYU, I was president of the South Asian Student Association. Did I then speak for all South Asian students on campus? No, because you had people back when I went to school, and I'm going to age myself, Larry, the early 90s. There was serious division over at the time Hindu-Muslim riots in India in '93, and there was a lot of this on campus. So, one of the things that we were, I think, sensitive about is not making a statement that stood for the whole organization. And I
So,
don't
so
see that today.
what about the kids now who are literally making those statements, right? I mean, they are out there with the bullhorn and they're saying, what's that? Oh, I'm going to get it wrong. From the river to the sea. If I remember, that was the thing they're saying. If I remember,
Okay.
someone's going to probably correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, but I think they're saying from the river to the sea, and people taking that. And I'm not well versed in this, so I may be wrong on this, but if I remember right, that's taken as meaning that Palestine will be from the river to the sea, so therefore Israel would not exist. I heard someone else tell me what that meant was they want peace from the river to the sea, which means they want peace every place. I don't know which one it is. I could see people taking it badly, but either way, if you're saying that, this goes to your earlier point. Aren't you now responsible if someone takes it the wrong way and thinks you're an anti-Semite or something? Aren't you responsible then?
You know, the answer is I think you can, if you're going to speak up, you may face consequences for that. And then it comes down to what kind of person you are as an individual, whether you're going to be able to live it. Are you going to back off from those statements, or are you going to step into them? I mean, the hope is that colleges breed people that'll step into those students and not back away. That's the way it should be, but that's not what it is, right? So you have
But
other
what about
students
the
now
idea of it
ducking for
being
cover.
fair?
That's what's happening. You have some students ducking for cover. That also is a
I
telling sign.
I have an ethical issue that I'm asking about now. This is maybe not legal, it's ethical. And that is, are the kids, and if you're young watching now, please take this the right way. But can't an 18 or 20-year-old just be stupid and just like say some dumb stuff because they want to be cool or because they think it's the cool thing of the day and really regret what they're like? They think that's the cool thing. And then they look later and go, what the hell was I thinking? And now that person's going to be punished. Right now, they want to get a job at, they're going to be anti-Israel and they want to get a job at some firm for a bunch of guys from Israel, right? And then they're going to be like, no, I saw what you said 2 years ago at this school. And the guy may be like, yeah, but I was stupid. Like, I was dumb. I was trying to be with the cool guy. There was this hot chick, right, who was there, and I was trying to get in her pants or something, right? I mean, I'm kind of joking, but I'm kind of not. You see my point, right?
I do, and the reality is that's a larger societal question, right?
Sure.
How much do we punish children, right, or young adults, whatever
Young
you
adults.
want to
In this
call
case, they're
them,
not kids.
right?
They're
They're
young
not
adults.
kids; they're young adults, and how much do we punish them? Well, I don't have an answer for that. I mean, look, you're a private institution, you're a company, and you don't want to hire somebody who spewed out what you believe are anti-Semitic comments. That's your right. I mean, that's not the criticizing somebody doesn't put you in a protected class, right? So,
Okay.
if you don't want to hire somebody because they spewed out comments, that's your right as a private business owner. There's nothing preventing that from happening. So, I don't want, and I think you should appreciate this, Larry. I don't want the government to tell me who I must hire, right? So if I don't want to hire some kid who when he was a 18-year-old at Harvard or Yale or Stony Brook or wherever, Queens College, because on their social media, or we dug enough and we found this stuff, well, that should be my right as a business owner, right? And that's up to me. So I don't think this is really an ethical
So then
or
let's
moral
go
issue.
to
This
a level,
is a
though.
private issue. Government versus private industry here.
So let me I got a couple people comment. Let me grab a couple of comments here. Roy says river to the sea is about Israel not existing. I've heard that too, right? I've heard two versions of this. What Roy is saying, I've absolutely heard, and I've also heard someone say no, it means they want peace from. But when I heard the actual shouts, I didn't hear the word peace. If I would have heard the word peace, then I'd probably be more believable. But I only heard from the river to the sea. I didn't hear, I want peace from the river to the sea. I would have been more open to hear that. Have you heard this, Ben? Have you heard this phrase?
I've heard the phrase, but I've never given it as much thought as what you're putting into it. It doesn't really, I don't really care. Look, I think protests are good, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that there should be, if people down here, and I'm in downtown Manhattan, I live, or as far as near the southern tip of Manhattan. I walk to my office, and I see people, with these signs up, or putting up pictures of some of the kidnapped in Israel, or
Mm.
kidnapped from Israel, and stuff. And there was a thing in the New York Post today about a school teacher, or was it yesterday? It was on the New York Post cover. If you give me access, I can pull it up, and we can show it. But some school teacher, I'm sorry, some public defender was in the papers today because she was, caught on social media tearing down some of those pictures of kidnapped people, and they're accusing her. She's keeping her job, but according to some of the reports, Jewish leaders want her to apologize. That shouldn't her to them. And I'm saying to myself, why is it that if somebody tears down pictures of
Okay.
kidnapped people in Israel, why is that anti-Semitic? In fact, you can take it another step and say that is propaganda, that
Wait a minute. So,
perpetuates
well,
anti-Palestinian sentiment by
okay. So
posting these
hold on.
things.
So what you're saying is, I'm going to be clear on this. What you're saying is, if I put those pictures of those hostages up, that someone can interpret that as anti-Palestinian propaganda.
Sure. I mean, because you're looking at this and going, wow, those Palestinians are bad, right? The
Oh,
average
that's
person,
okay.
the average person is going to sit there and go, well, the Hamas, government doesn't speak for all of Palestine. The Palestine, organization does, and whatever it is. My point is, I mean, and here's the thing: what can we, as people here in the city, do to help free those hostages in Gaza, right? What
Okay.
effect does that have? And why is it that if you take that down, you're considered anti-Semitic, right? Where does pro-Israel or anti-Israel mean that you're against Jews? Why can't you have a position that you agree, you believe that the Palestinians should have their own homeland, or whatever it is, or they take over the whole place? How does that make you anti-Jewish, right? I mean, it's just, I think that to say that there's only one side to this issue, I think it's problematic. Now, the flip side of that is, it's a horrific thing that happened. And so the question of what is the appropriate military response, I don't have an answer for that, right? I'm not the one at war. Our country wasn't just invaded, right? So, and there are still hostages that are being held. So, what's the appropriate proportional response? I'm not sure. I mean, I could speak
Mm.
somewhat theologically about just war theory and
Well,
what's appropriate, but I don't know, how practical that is.
but I'm not sure in other words, if I put up those
I
things,
like that. I
right?
got you to pause, Larry. That's good.
Yeah, no, if I put up those pieces, right, and I say, hey, look, here are the people who were held hostage. I think you're right. There's no way that some New Yorker here can solve that, right? I think you're correct. But the same thing, isn't that then free political speech, right? I'm saying, hey, you should support Israel, or you should support these people, or maybe I want you to give money, or maybe I want you to call your congressman and say support Israel. So I could see someone putting up, and that not being necessarily anti-Hamas, but more being support my political agenda that I have for Israel. That's why I'm doing it.
Sure,
I could see
sure.
it that way too. I wouldn't automatically see it. I mean, it could be anti-Hamas. I get where you're going,
I'm
but it
not
could
going
be just
anti-Hamas, anti-Palestine, anti-Palestinian,
anti-Palestine. Sure,
right?
it
I
could be
mean,
anti-Palestine. I agree. It could, but it could be either. And then me taking it down, unless it's on private property, I don't see that as a problem either. That's me saying I disagree and we shouldn't support Israel or whatever. I could see both of those.
right.
But the imagery is freaking terrible. Like, these are people who are hostages and you're ripping it down. It's like it's like scratching the picture off the milk carton. I mean, it's terrible. Like, isn't it?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. I mean,
If
it's
you saw a
you're
dude If you saw a dude in the store and getting the milk cart where have you seen my kid with a Sharpie and Xing out the kid, I mean, wouldn't that be terrible?
Let's talk, basic positions of a libertarian. Look, you have a right to, if you want to put it up, you put it up. This isn't the government, right, putting these things up, right? So, because the government shouldn't be putting these things up, right? The city of New York and whoever, right, shouldn't be putting these things up. So if private people are putting these things up on public land, well, then maybe I don't want to see that, right? Maybe I shouldn't have to, when I'm on my way to work, have to see this. Maybe I don't want to think about that, right? Maybe I don't want my kids to think about this, right? Maybe I'd rather put up a picture of the new Mets manager, right? Who we stole from you guys, right? So, I mean, that's maybe what I want to see. My point is that when you start doing this stuff and you start calling people, a thing or a bigot because you do so, I have a problem with that. Just as I have a problem with, there were these people that took down gay pride flags around Stonewall, or knocked them down, and the DA's office investigating. I mean, we had somebody who was being looked at for this, and again, I
want to walk down that road
private.
This is where
these are
I'm
private
with you
actions.
on this.
Yeah,
this is where I'm with you, and here's I'm with you, because you mentioned to me when we spoke earlier that now we have Alvin Bragg heading up to Albany, trying to kind of expand hate crimes, right? For this, expand the definition, or maybe even have more laws for hate crimes. That always scares me, right? That, because now we're not going into, I'm mad because I think you're anti-Semitic and I want to scold you or not hire you or somehow shun you. But now I got cops coming to my house and put me in jail. Now I'm starting to get really worried. I know you're going to be against it, but go ahead, please tell me.
Yeah, I mean, look, the problem with hate crimes legislation is that you've now enhanced something that you put something up one level up. And when hate crimes legislation went into effect, what it was, they specifically excluded, certain groups of crimes. And some of those groups of crimes were like gang assault. So Alvin Bragg gave a press conference yesterday saying that if one person attacks another person because of his skin color or whatever it was, that's a hate crime. But when a group of people do it, it's not a hate crime. Well, and the reason for that was very specific, because gang assault is already an enhancement. So why add another enhancement to this? So what Bragg is doing is just being a politician and just playing what he believes is a wave where really now you're just giving more power to prosecutors to really jam up somebody. I'm representing a client now who is, to me, it's unjustly accused of a hate crime, and she was charged with breaking an ATM at a store, and there was an argument, and it wasn't racial or anything and all that stuff. But when the store clerk got nasty with her, she responded something like, leave me alone, you freaking Muslim, or something, But the reason, whatever happened, let's say she's guilty of breaking the things, her primary motivation for breaking this ATM machine wasn't because of this guy's religion or race or whatever it was. It was because she was pissed. They got into an argument, and boom. And then afterwards, some, things came out that should have been said.
Because the audience is not going to get a couple things you said, and it's very important. The first thing is, if someone breaks an ATM, they should be punished for breaking an ATM. They shouldn't be punished for something extra, which what people aren't going to get is, and this, I'm preaching to the choir for you, but the audience may not get this. This prosecutor is going to throw 97 charges on this guy to scare him into just going yes, or her. And he's going, yes, 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 put me in jail for a less period of time. And when in reality, what you want in a justice system is actually justice. You want the person to get fair sentencing, a fair trial, fair everything. And when you add these enhancements, you destroy the entire system.
How about one, Larry? One. You now changes from a misdemeanor to a felony. You now go from a charge which had a maximum, which would never happen, of up to a year in jail, to one where now potentially 4 years in jail. And
Wow.
all over something that wasn't the primary reason for the action.
Right.
And so this is where the problem with this action is it's, ultimately it's in the discretion of prosecutors who they choose to go after. Right.
Right.
And it's interesting, because if enough people lobby the district attorney from a certain, group of an area where he needs to vote, then you know what? All of a sudden you got a hate crime.
Yeah.
I mean,
I hate the idea because it's gonna feel good now, but it's never gonna hurt. It's never gonna actually hurt the people it's supposed to hurt. This is gonna hurt other people who don't deserve this in the future. It'll feel good now. See, yes, these people are anti-Semitic. We want to punish them. It'll feel good. Yeah, we'll feel good about this. And then 5 years from now, it's gonna be used against like a grandma who fell down and called somebody an Hispanic bad name or something. And she's now going to be ruined because of some law they added now.
Yeah. Let me give you an example of something that I dealt with when I was a prosecutor. 20 years ago.
You mean like 2 years ago? Yeah.
In the early 2000s, this case came across my desk, right? And all of a sudden, this hate crimes legislation only went into effect around 2000. And so this was after I got to the DA's office, and there was a case in Brooklyn where a Black woman who was charged and arrested got into a fight with a white woman in a parking lot over a parking spot, and she was charged. I mean, it could have gone either way. She gets arrested, and during the course of the arrest, she says something along the lines, while they're fighting, it's my spot, you fat dyke. Right? Or something along those lines. And all of a sudden, it was like, prosecute this woman for a hate crime. And I'm like, what? Right? And I didn't want to, so they took the case away from me. So,
you were an ethical DA, and they said, we can't have that.
I said, that wasn't the reason, that they got into this fight. They got into this fight over a stupid parking spot. It got physical. They got out of the car. They started fighting. And then she, said things, probably she shouldn't have said, but that wasn't the reason. See, to charge the hate crime, the reason for you doing something has to be with the intent to commit a crime against because of that person's religion or sexual identity.
So she would have had to have already known this woman was a lesbian and then went after her because she was a lesbian.
Correct.
For it to be a hate crime.
Correct.
But the fact that she says stuff, she's probably trying to hurt her, right? She's probably mad, punching. So she's saying stuff because she wants to be hurtful because she's fighting. So she does a slur because she wants to hurt the woman, not because of the hate crime. I get what and that is my concern. I think you're absolutely correct. That is my worry, that this is going to be used for that. And I get why people would be happy about it now because it feels right? It feels good now.
I was also when I went into private practice, there was a community gathering of I was a member of the South Asian bar, and I joined private practice, and right off the bat, there was something came up which they brought to my attention, members of the bar association, of some restaurant owner in Lower Manhattan who was throwing a party, and a fight broke out. And then that fight had nothing to do, it was just over alcoholism, right? There was a mixed party, and the owner of the restaurant, which was like sort of a club, was, of Indian descent. And then during the course of it, some words were shouted, you fucking Indian, or you fucking Hindu, or whatever it may have been. And members of the community wanted this to be charged as a hate crime. And I was like, listen, the fight had nothing to do with people's races. These guys came in afterwards, and guys were pissed, they're drunk, right? It was just a stupid bar fight. Just because racial slurs were yelled afterwards, right, doesn't make it a hate crime.
But I got to tell you,
you're talking
you and
about
I have seen
ruining
this
people's
before.
kids, people's lives over this stuff.
Yes, that's my point, right? It's not like I don't want a guy punished for doing a crime, but I want the guy to be punished rightly for the crime that he or she
Right.
did, not just, well, he's a bad guy, put him in jail forever because he said bad words. And I think we sometimes feel that way. Let me grab a couple of comments. Shelley says, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will lock me up without me rights.
It's true. Absolutely true.
Shelley's right. So I'd rather you hit me with a stick. It's better. So yes, you have an actual question. This is from CM Pravda. What percentage of misdemeanor hate crimes get pled down or dropped for other charges of assault, battery, and vandalism? So I wonder, do people use it? Like when they get charged with a hate crime, are prosecutors doing that in an attempt to get someone to create? I mean, my image is that. Is it true? Do prosecutors actually throw hate crimes on top of things to get, the accused to plead down to something else? Is that a thing?
So I'd like to think that that's not why they're doing it.
That's what I do. I'll say that.
Let me tell you something though. That is a huge, huge gun to point at someone's head, particularly someone who doesn't have a criminal record, who wants to get a job where there's going to be a background check, and then to elevate something from a misdemeanor, what would have been just a misdemeanor fight, which would end up in a disorderly conduct, or even a lesser thing where these things get dismissed and sealed, to now charging him with a felony. So there's the term misdemeanor hate crime is actually a misnomer, because all you're doing is elevating a misdemeanor to a felony, but that's really what it is. But it's not it's a misnomer, but it's actually accurate. So under the law, you're not supposed to, you don't use that term, but that's actually what happens. You get, as in the case of my client, something that should be an A misdemeanor, slap on the wrist, do some community service, maybe get some alcohol counseling, and then, have a good day, to now, hey, you're being charged with the felony. You're better take our misdemeanor plea offer, where you will have a permanent record, or will indict you on the felony.
Yes.
And so this is where it gets, and unless you have the will and the resources to fight this and take this up, knowing that, hey, they're not going to be able to prove this as a hate crime, right? But do you have the will and the financial resources to fight that? Most people don't.
I know. One of my friends once told me this, a lawyer that actually Roy knows. He told me, he said, can you afford justice? And I wish that wasn't a thing, but that's a thing. Can you afford justice? If you can afford justice, okay. You can't afford it, I guess you're pleading. So yes, It is terrible. So Legacy he's unhappy. He says, hate crimes are bogus thought crimes that give the government larger scope of power. Hey, he's not wrong.
Correct.
He's not wrong.
I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So he comes back though. CM Prophet says, if someone talks about my mama, are they considered protected class? Andrew Dice Clay. So yes, pretty cute. I like that one.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Absolutely. I don't think so. Gene says, I was definitely stupid when I was 18. Gene, me too. I'm with you on that one. I was definitely nowhere near as wise as I am now. And I'm just glad that when I was young, there was no internet. No internet.
No iPhones, no recordings like this.
No iPhones.
It's crazy.
Nothing. Yes, absolutely. 100%. I'm very glad. Shelley says, holding young people accountable for the propaganda spotted during college that they likely learned from professors, and then denying them employment sounds very much like a social credit score. She has 2 points here I want to bring up. 2 points. The first one is the professors are the issue, right? They're the one. If you go back 20 years, maybe 30, 40 years now. God, then we're old. Anyway, so if you go back a certain number of years, most of the professors would have just sat back and watched the kids do stupid stuff and laughed. Now they're there. They're in it. They're the ones starting it. Like the professors are there now. And I'll go back to this. The thing that gets me a bit upset about the sides they pick. They have now decided, and this is my personal view, maybe you disagree. They've decided now that everything has to be looked at through the lens of oppressor versus the oppressed. Big fish versus small fish, no matter what. And history does not matter. So if this is 1967 or 73, when there was like 4 Arab nations attacking Israel, these people would have been like, Israel is correct. They're 100% right. They wouldn't care about the history. They would go, Israel's a smaller guy. There's 4 attacking them. Israel is right and correct no matter what, regardless of history. They wouldn't care what any Arab thought. They don't care about Palestinians. They wouldn't have cared. But now in the case of Israel-Gaza, Israel's the big guy and Gaza's the small guy. So now same rules apply. Israel's now wrong no matter what. Doesn't matter about history. Who cares about what happened? Doesn't matter. Whoever is the big guy, the power dynamic is all that matters. And the one who is more powerful is just by default wrong. They don't look at any nuance. They don't look at anything. It's just, if you're powerful, you're wrong. And I feel like this ideology has been going through colleges for at least 20 years, if not longer, but at least 20 years. And now it culminates here. And now we wonder why people are so angry. I think this is the core, and it's professors. I think Shelley's right. This is professors. These kids are stupid. They couldn't find Israel on a map. Even the Jewish ones couldn't find Israel on a map, right? They couldn't, right? The professor tell them that.
I love the concept of social credit score. That's awesome, yes. Right? It goes up, it goes down, depending on, if there's credit checks on you and all this stuff. Look, if you saw this weekend, and I know you watch Bill Maher and I do, if you saw he had Fareed Zakaria on, and then Fareed Zakaria had Bill Maher on, or they taped the interview for CNN's Fareed Zakaria show on Sunday, and Bill Maher has been talking about this for a long time, about the problem with college campuses and the wokeness and the idea, and Bill Maher is a big Israel supporter, and look, that's his right. I think he's oversimplified it a bit, and I think that Fareed is trying to take this sort of like, hey, you can't kill all these people without saying you can't kill all these people kind of approach, and he's trying to be as diplomatic as he can about it. Whereas I think that Bill Maher, while I agree with him on most issues, and especially about, he's the guy who's talked about this a lot, the problems with college campuses and free speech and or the lack thereof on college campuses. I think on this issue, he is just, too one-sided on this issue. And that, look, you get to have a certain point where you're going, okay, all right, 1,400 Israeli dies so far, like over 10,000 Palestinians. I don't know. I mean, look, if you want to look at that, is that proportional? I think that you have to take a look at this, and eventually,
my issue with the proportional piece, though, right?
What I'm going to say, if you give me, like, what I'm saying is, if you look at this, and this is what I was saying to some, I have a number of close Jewish friends, is that there's a point of where the world is with you, right, and can feel your pain, but then when you start, doing things like, the United States and Iraq, and things like that, world sentiment is going to take, is going to turn against you. And here it's interesting because I think you have the major newspapers, the Washington Post and the New York Times, basically providing what I think is maybe the only time that those papers are balanced, right? They're kind of presenting both sides. And I think that when you see the front page and you see about how many, the problem with people in Gaza, they don't have anesthesia, they're treating people on the wounded on the floor. I think that's, a good thing that they're talking about it. But, the idea of proportionality, I mean, at a certain point,
but let me cover a couple
turn
pieces
world
here.
sentiment against you.
Piece number one. I'm not necessarily against the idea of proportionality necessarily, but there are two buts. One of them is, how can America decide proportionality when we invaded like 9 countries for 9/11?
Right.
I mean, like, we were the worst when it came to proportionality, right? 9/11 hit us, and we were like, we're bombing everybody. Like, everybody. And we didn't bomb Saudi Arabia, where all the people came from. Like, the one country where they all came from, we were like, you're our buddy, and then let's bomb everybody else. And then let's invade Iraq, and let's bomb Somalia, and let's bomb we like bombed everybody. We invaded Iraq, we invaded Afghanistan. So I guess if we're going to talk proportionality, maybe America shouldn't discuss this. Maybe let the Norwegians or someone discuss that. I don't think America should be discussing proportionality. I think we kind of blew that one out of the water. And we still put a Patriot Act that's destroying our country to this day. We still bomb people to this day. So yes, I get what you're talking about, but there's a second piece though too, I think, right? At what point does someone, and their belief, I'm not defending Israel or not defending Israel. I'm just saying, if you thought there was a guy waiting outside your house and you thought he might come in and not do horrible things, but you thought he might come in and steal and empty your refrigerator, that's what he might do, and slap your kid. That's what I think he's going to do. He's going to come in, he's going to steal from your fridge and slap your kid. How do you know that? Because last week he broke in and he stole from your refrigerator, he slapped your kid and ran. Now, that guy's outside of your house now, ready to go and do it again. Are you going to walk over to him, take his food and slap him? That would be proportional, wouldn't it? I'm going to take it. So I'm just saying, I might do something else to some man who slapped my kid and who broke into my house. And knowing you, Vin, I think you would do something else to some man who smacked your kid. I don't think you would just be nice to him. I think somebody's going to the hospital that evening, and I don't think it's you. That's all I'm saying. So if that happens,
I don't want to
get
my point. Yeah, of course, and I don't want to get too far afield. I'm not saying here that Israel shouldn't be defending itself or that they don't have a right to go into Palestine and try to feed those houses. That's not what I'm saying at all. Okay. What I'm saying is that at a certain point, when you have all these civilians that are dying as a result of your action, you're going to turn world sentiment against you. And you're going to help. True. I think you're going to help the Palestinian cause. So,
I agree with you completely.
You have a situation where Israel is considered to have the best intelligence, the best military, all these things. And so then it gets you're in a situation where you see Israel's leader having all sorts of issues, right? Corruption probes. He's trying to limit the power of the Supreme Court. And
he's got some issues.
He's holding on to barely. He's got holding on to government, and then every single intelligence apparatus fails at the same time.
Yep.
As this goes, and they just walk across, and all these things are happen. Is it out of the realm of possibility to think that maybe this was meant to happen, or this they wanted this to happen?
Say it out loud, not out of the realm. I've said it. I think he knew. No doubt. I think this is 9/11. I think America knew and did nothing. I am not a conspiracy theorist, and I don't think America did 9/11. I don't believe that. I know some people do. I do not. I think America knew it could happen and was like, whatevs, just like Pearl Harbor, just like this. And I think that Netanyahu, not the average Israelis. Remember, I think a difference. The average Israelis, they're trying to live their life. But I think Netanyahu heard this might happen. He went, oh, well, I guess I'll be a savior now. I think he knew, and I think he did nothing. That is my opinion. I think he knew and did nothing. And I think it's him, not Israelis. I think it's him. Him and his people were desperate. They saw it was coming and just shut up. And now they're trying to be saviors. I agree with you. And I'll say it out loud. I don't care. I think that's what happened. Yeah. I totally
it just seems to be, look, I'm no expert on Middle Eastern affairs or anything. I'm just a layman, right? This isn't a legal issue, right? The legal issues, I'm an expert, right? I can speak about certain things, particularly when it comes to the criminal law and the federal, system and all this stuff. I'm just saying, just certain things play out a certain way, right? And you're looking at this and going, okay, wow, this is an opportune moment, right?
Yes.
And it just
And
happened
I'll go one
upon that.
step further here.
Yeah.
I think Hamas has already won the PR battle. The
Mm.
PR battle Hamas has already won. And here's the harshest part of this. And I've said it before, and I don't have a problem saying it again. The leaders of Hamas don't live in Gaza. They live in Iran. They live in Qatar. They live in other places. None of them are getting bombed, right? They don't care. They're still millionaires and billionaires. And half of them aren't even the same kind of Muslim, right? They're not even the same kind of Muslim. They don't even care. Those are some other Muslims. We don't care if they die. So they send them tons of money and said, go out into Israel and fight. And most of those young kids who were out there fighting, who became monsters, they became monsters because they felt there was nothing else there. They believed in the thing they were doing, knowing most of them were going to get dying and get killed. So they didn't care what they were going to do. They just said, well, let's go do it. Who cares? And the people who paid them and the people who support them didn't care. Watch them all die or watch anybody get bombed, and they don't care at all. They don't care. And America doesn't care. America's supposed to sell weapons. America doesn't care about any of them either. And I'm going to say Netanyahu doesn't care. I don't care if you get mad at me. Netanyahu. The average Israeli, in fact, I would say even many Americans, particularly those I have friends in Tel Aviv. So I was concerned for them. Luckily, nothing happened to them. So I know people.
I had two friends who were over there at the time, and I messaged them. I was hoping
me too.
They were there, but they weren't near it. Thank God.
Yep. My friends too. So I know there are a lot of people who care about Israel. Our government doesn't care about Israel. Some of our people do. Our government's like, oh, great. Now we can sell more weapons. Awesome.
Right.
Now we can finally ditch Ukraine. That's quagmire. We can ditch them for a new, cool, younger war. This is a sexier war. We'll trade our war in. This is a war we want. That's what the leadership cares about. I know I sound cynical, but it happens every single time, man. Every time.
Well, let me bring this back. I mean, there's what's bigger than the military industrial complex? I would say the pharmaceutical industrial complex here in America, right? And you have basically a situation that came into effect, and we're talking about free speech, right? Let's break this a little broader. If California government has its way, or people in the California government, they would force doctors who challenge the consensus on COVID to make them lose their licenses. Now there's been a stay put in effect. You're aware of this, right? They passed this thing to basically silence doctors who dare question the orthodoxy of the COVIDians, right? Lockdowns and everything else, and vaccines, and it's been held up, and it's not going to survive constitutional scrutiny, because fortunately, we have we have a court that actually respects the Constitution. And there are people who disagree with me on this, but I am a person who is a never Trumper, but I like his Supreme Court picks, because during this madness and stuff, they're the ones who helped reopen churches and places like this.
I agree. Most of them come out of New York. You know that,
right?
They came out of our state, man.
Absolutely.
Because our judges suck, and I hope some of them are watching now. Because if you're watching now, be very clear. You suck. You are terrible. I hope you're watching. I mean, they're terrible.
There's nothing worse than the political hacks that are sitting in state court in New York, right? I imagine other places too, but we can speak about New York, right? And I've seen it firsthand, and it just some of these and they look. There are some really good judges who really care what they about doing their job right. Sadly, they seem to be fewer and far between.
Yes.
And that's the reality of the situation. And so you have to hope that at least, at the higher levels, you have smarter people. I think you do in the U.S. Supreme Court, but not in too many other places.
No, I agree with you completely. I think it's terrible. But your point being goes back to my other worry, right? Which is, if I actually don't have a problem, and I agree with you on this, and I think most people do, I don't have a problem with some law firm saying, I think you're anti-Semitic, so I'm not going to hire you. I don't. I don't have a
problem with that.
I don't at all. I do worry about something. The next step, which you bring up, was now does that person, do they lose their law license? Right? That's when I go, it's too far, right? And not that I want you to be an anti-Semite, but that shouldn't stop you from being a lawyer, right?
I agree. I agree.
Right? You can be an anti-Semitic lawyer. You can be a racist lawyer. That should still be legal in America. But if I don't want to hire you because you're a racist or an anti-Semite, that should also be legal. My
Right.
worry is what you just said, that now the state will step in and decide who is racist and who isn't, who's an anti-Semite, who's not. And now, okay, now you can't have a doctor's license. Or worse, you can't have even, a license to be a plumber because you go into someone's house and you kill them because you're an anti-Semite or whatever. They'll do that. That is not beyond us. And your point in California is exactly right. That is my biggest worry, that government will get involved.
Yeah, and it's incredible, like, that Biden had a disinformation, agency where so many of the things that were considered disinformation have turned out to be true. Too many things, right? Lab leak theory. The idea of vaccines, that they're ineffective. They don't work. They don't stop the spread, right? That it was a pandemic of the unvaccinated, where by the end of 22, the New York Times and the Washington Post were reading, it is no longer a pandemic of the unvaccinated. It is a pandemic of the vaccinated. And so, this stuff just like, and so we have the government trying to tell, and there was a big decision that came out in federal court that basically put a stop on the Biden regime and said that you need to stop telling social media what to do.
That was my next thing. Yes.
He's going, he's going to, his group is going to go try to get around that. And they accuse, Trump of being autocratic, where I think that this president is amongst the most autocratic we've ever had.
So let me touch that piece, because again, what people often say is, well, what private sector does is private sector does. And I agree. But once you start getting the government involved, now I'm worried. And you hit it up perfectly. Do I want Twitter to censor me? Of course not. Do I want YouTube to? Of course not. However, if it's a business transaction, then they should be able to tell me what the terms of service are. It's a contract back and forth. But that's, to your point, that's not what happened. What happened was the Biden administration said, we don't like these guys, shut them down. Now, let me move to the next level then. If a college decides, I want to throw you out because I think you're an anti-Semite, or I want to punish you or put something on your permanent record or whatever, does it matter if that college is private or funded by the government? Does that change at all in your view? Should the college be somehow differently dealt with if the government is actually funding it or not?
So this goes to the heart of public universities have faced a lot more scrutiny than private universities. That's just the way the laws are set up, and whether that is right or wrong is a tough question. Certainly private universities, you have a code of conduct that you have to follow, whereas public universities, and I'll take it, in a slightly different context. This comes up. I mean, it's very hard to challenge a decision of a private university.
Right.
And if that private university doesn't take any sort of federal funding, I'm not sure which universities do or don't.
Right, of course.
But if you generally, it's hard to say. But it's going to be much more difficult to challenge what a private university does. Whereas in a public university, you have a much stronger platform or grounds or the ability to challenge.
But here's my argument
of a public
university.
My argument. Sure.
About 80%.
I'm going to grab some water while you do that.
Go ahead, please. About 80% of all college loans come directly from the Fed. About 80%, give or take, of all college could come directly from the Fed. The federal government is financing, which means even in private universities, there's a whole lot of government money going to those universities.
Yeah.
Is my argument better if I bring that up? I mean, look, it's really government money. The government is authorizing this. The money's coming from the government into these schools. It's government money, literally. Then the students pay the government, but the government pays university. So the university's client is kind of the government.
Sure. And I think that to the extent that the government tries to influence a private university, I think you have a grounds to challenge that. Because ultimately, that's sort of when the government, and this is a slightly different issue than what you were talking about, Larry, because what I was talking about with the court cases and social media was that when people always say, well, Twitter can censor, or, before Elon Musk, Facebook,
Right.
that's right, that they should be stopping, disinformation. Well, the problem is that anytime in any aspect, when you have the government influencing a private entity, then that entity is now a state actor, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
now that you now can apply what happens, when the government, does something wrong, to the actions of the actor, the state actor, right? So, this comes up in a law enforcement context where, you have private security at like Macy's or wherever, and if they are acting and they try to extract a confession out of you, and then all they're doing is holding you till the cops come, well, they're state actors, right? They are,
Mm.
and there's some case law here, there's some exceptions and all this other stuff, but that's basically the principle. So if Twitter is doing, or before Elon Musk was doing the bidding of the government, well, that's a problem. Then they are de
Right.
facto state actors, and now you can bring First Amendment arguments to these cases. And then the other problem is that really, like, social media is your public square, right? And so, you have to look at these and say, hey, what level of scrutiny do you apply from a constitutional perspective to these agencies? And these are developing issues. These are not settled issues. So,
Okay.
these things are
Yeah.
going to get up. That case is it with an intermediate appellate court and may reach the Supreme Court, but I think the Biden administration knows they're going to lose, so they probably won't take it up that far,
Right.
or they want to lose to make a statement to criticize the Supreme Court. So
Oh,
I think,
right.
I think I've seen them do that, in some instances, and in other instances,
So
not challenge certain decisions.
Roy has a question for you. He says, Vin, don't you think it's constitutionally suspect that Republicans purposefully put only Catholics on the Supreme Court? I have my view on this too. Let me hear yours, unless you want me to go first. But I have a view. But go ahead. What do you think?
Well, first of all, the question comes from and with all, respect and love to your audience members, that's not true, right? Gorsuch is not Catholic, and the Democrats put forth Sotomayor, who is Catholic. Okay, so
Okay.
it's not just Republicans who are putting forth Catholic members. The other individuals are Catholic, Roberts, Amy Coney Barrett, but Gorsuch is a Protestant. So,
Here we
I
go.
mean, you have that, right? And I'm not sure what the religion of this
The
Ketanji
Supreme
Brown
Court
is.
has been filled with Catholics and Jews. And the reason is they were the ones going to law school. That's what it was. And that's because, and people don't realize this is historical. Back in the day, many years ago, all the white shoe firms were only WASPs. They wouldn't let the Catholics and the Jews into these firms.
Correct.
It was blatantly racist. You were Catholic, you were a Jew, you couldn't come into these cool white shoe firms. So what did it mean? It meant all the Catholics and Jews had to bust their ass and be better lawyers and work harder in the streets. And they did. And that's why they got so goddamn good. And that's why so many of them are judges now. It was historical. That's just historical. All the WASPy lawyers were all high-tech business lawyers making big money. So all the Catholics and the Jews had to bust their ass, and that's what happened. Anyway,
there was a time when Jews weren't allowed into Harvard, right?
That's
and
correct.
Now, it's Asians who are being allowed in.
That's right. Now they're throwing Asians out. Exactly. Well, you never know. If you take this 30 years from now, the Supreme Court might be filled with Asians. Right? You go 30, 40 years from now, it might be filled with of all Asians. You never know. Because the same thing could happen. The same thing could happen, right? We don't know how that's going to work, but some of it's just demographics.
Asians still are not, you can't get past the doctor, engineer, that kind of thing. We're still not going in the same amount, in the same droves as we go to medical school or engineering or tech or anything along those lines, right? We're working to get more. There's more of us in the law, but just probably not going to get to those numbers.
Maybe. Well, you got to work. You got to work a little bit. 50 years, maybe. Okay, there we go. That's good. I love that. So Shelley teases. She says, "Notice all the apologies from the Fauci followers." Oh, wait. Yes, and I'm going to say something which is a little bit off topic, but I think you'll agree with me on this one, man. If you happen to see that
If it's
Bill Maher, which I know you
anti-Fauci, I
did,
will.
there we go. Yes, yes. But you saw the Bill Maher piece when that one writer and guy from NYU professor says, we need some grace and forgiveness because we didn't know what we didn't know. And then I showed in March of 2020, I literally did videos on what was going to happen, why it was going to happen, and it was right there. I said, I knew exactly what was going to happen. I showed you, I have receipts. Here they are 3.5 years ago. And no one could see it because that was when all social media decided to turn me down and to tune me down so no one could hear that I was telling them how bad this was going to be. The problem I have with them is they didn't say, you know what? Government should have never had this kind of power. We should never be locking people down this. We should be helping our people, educating them, showing them what's right, trying to get the right things. That's what we should be doing. They didn't say that. They went, well, we don't have enough information. If we had some more information, then we could have been able to ruin your lives. And so my answer is no forgiveness, no grace, because you didn't learn your lesson. That's my view.
Wholeheartedly agree with you. And you weren't the only one shut down. I had, I was the one, I was also out there saying, screw you to any governor.
I remember because you were fighting them because they said that criminal attorneys weren't essential. I remember that. And you were like, well, you're going to stop arresting people? If you stop arresting people, you're right. But if you're still arresting people, then we're still essential. I remember that. And didn't you fight like the coach or something? What did you do?
Yeah, no, I sent a letter to Cuomo's regime when he announced what was essential, which were cops, prosecutors, and liquor stores. And I had no problem with liquor stores whatsoever being essential, right? So, but when he didn't include criminal defense attorneys, I got mad, right? So I said something to him as soon as he announced it on that Friday night that lockdowns were going into effect on Sunday. So it was March 20th. I also wrote a piece that I sent out to a bunch of publications. The New York Daily News picked it up and published it the next morning of how criminal defense lawyers are essential. And then by Sunday morning, before the lockdown orders went into effect that evening, criminal defense lawyers were declared essential. So
there we go. There we go.
The problem was it was only 2 states that didn't declare all lawyers essential. It was New York and Michigan, right? And so it was Cuomo because he was as authoritarian as you could get. And so
Absolutely.
Guys like him and guys like Gavin Newsom and Governor Whitmer and Phil Murphy, man, I mean, they just loved the power that the COVID lockdowns and failure of Donald Trump's leadership to take and set the right tone for the entire country, created created a void which they filled. Right?
They did.
If Trump had listened to the people, and I think we've talked about it, who wrote what's called the Great Barrington Declaration.
Absolutely.
Doctors and epidemiologists who said, hey, let's focus on protecting the most vulnerable and let everybody else go out in society because you never quarantined healthy people before.
Right.
That you don't do that, right?
Right.
And so, and it's not going to work. You can't stop it ever. So people knew this. But then all of a sudden, you give blanket protection to Pfizer and Moderna because you can't sue them for this stuff until that's coming off next year, by the way. That was put into effect so that if you got hurt, you can't sue them until 2024. Well, Pfizer's going to have its, reckoning.
Let's go back to our original piece, though, if I could. We went through a lot of stuff. I want to come back to something, though. I have a secondary worry with this.
Sure.
And the secondary worry is it goes similar with this piece. It goes similar. And that is the idea of self-censoring. So now if I'm in college and I disagree with something the government does, I'm going to be scared to say something because now they're going to put it on my record and now I can't get a job. And so now I'm going to shut up. Same with the jab. Same with the lockdowns. I'm going to be scared to say something because now I get kicked off of social media, or now I can't get a job, or now I lose my license, or now, to your point, I lose my doctor's license. I can't be a doctor now because I say the wrong thing now. And that is a bigger issue. And the self-censoring piece, while it isn't critical for me as an individual, it is critical for a doctor or a lawyer because all of the great movements in law and medicine didn't come from the establishment. In science, didn't come from the establishment. It came from the rebel, right? The rebel is the one who makes the jump, the leap in whether it's law, whether it's in theory, whether it's in a courtroom, in a doctor's office, on an operating table, in science, in anything, whatever it is, it's always the rebel. And if we make an environment where everyone is self-censoring, we're going to stagnate as a society. Am I going too far on this, Vin?
No, I think your concern is valid, but I also think you're being a little idealistic here, Larry.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. I don't think
Please.
most people give a shit. I think most
What do you mean?
people are all too happy to, just trudge along and not make waves. And in fact, go along with what the majority want. So the people that are, I think the people that are going to self-censor are probably going to self-censor are going to self-censor anyway. Right? They're the ones who are not going to speak up because they never do. They don't want to, they're too afraid, or they just weren't ever going to do so. So I think that that's the reality of it, because I mean you have enough people where most people aren't going to say things, right? I mean, what you see on
hold
college
on. What about the reverse?
are a small group of people.
Hold on. Let me see if I can sway you a little bit. All right. Okay. There's some people who are not going to say anything, they're going to self-censor anyway. But there's people on the fence. And now here comes Larry Sharpe, and I'm going to say some things that are against the grain. Now, the people who are going to self-censor themselves, they're never going to come talk to me. They're like, Larry's crazy. I don't want to do shh. But what about the people on the fence who might have jumped on my side and said, yes, that guy's right. Let's do it. And they're like, yeah, but I might lose my job. Yeah, but I might not get it. Am I missing the fringe that might have been the most important piece that gets me over that top, that tipping point?
I think most people aren't going to say anything anyway, right? So you've heard the term silent majority, right? Yes. And people on the Democrats were shocked when Trump won. Right.
Yes.
And they wanted to pay anybody. And I didn't vote for Trump. I voted for Clinton. And I know your audience, some of them are going to hate me for this, right?
I voted for Gary Johnson.
I know you did. I voted for you, though, when you ran.
Oh, thank you.
Let me say that. I voted for you, and I publicly supported you, right? But you were the only libertarian candidate I did that for, right? And I voted for Biden because I thought I couldn't stand Trump, right? However, when you look at the voter, one thing, and when he won in 2016, I was upset. But as this went along, I realized that a ton of good people voted for Trump. A ton of people, because they were just sick of the left and how the left had taken over the Democratic Party, and that the party was not a centrist party anymore. And he also, vowed to appoint conservative judges, judges that were going to tilt the country back towards the middle. And he did that, right? He campaigned on that and he did it. He was the only politician that, fulfilled his campaign promises.
Well, I always give people credit where credit is due, right? I'm not a big Trump fan. I'm not a big Trump fan. But I will give you that. He did say he would appoint conservative judges, and he did. Right. Absolutely. He said it, and he did it. So 100%.
Whereas Biden promised to be a person who governed for all Americans and in the middle, and he has been, he is really gone to the left with all his policies.
I said it before, and I'll say it again. I don't think he's going to make the election. He's not going to be. I don't think he's going to be on the ballot.
I think when Bill Maher, goes on Fareed Zakaria, gets interviewed by him on the CNN part of the weekend interviews, and he says, and Fareed is looking at him like, why do you think Biden could lose? How is this possible? He goes, it could happen. I think Bill Maher senses it, is freaked out about it, and is trying to do everything he can to try to prevent it, right? And so when you see that, and it's like, okay, there's a ton of people in this, in the center who Biden lied to,
Yes.
and I think that they're going to have their revenge, and it's going to be voting in Trump come the election, assuming he's not behind
I'm gonna
bars.
give you my
Assuming he's
rebel
not
thought.
behind bars. Yeah.
Yeah. But see, you actually the one who turned me on this, believe it or not. I thought Trump was gonna win. I've changed because of what you told me. You told me that you believe that Trump's gonna be convicted for sure of something. You were like, he's gonna be they're gonna, and I thought as I looked, I said, you're right. They're gonna get him on something. They're going to. That's because that's how they work. They're good at this. They're gonna get him on something no matter
Right.
what. I don't know what it is. They get him to something. I think over time, they're going to get him on something, which is going to begin to make him start to go down. But more importantly, ballot access, I think, is going to stop Trump. Because Trump, one thing that Democrats are very good at is finding ways to attack Trump. They are very good at that.
Yes.
And so they figured out another way of attacking him is throwing him off the ballot. There's like 6 states that are trying to get him thrown off the ballot. Right now, I think they're fighting him in Colorado. I think that's right. And if they get him thrown off a couple of ballots, the RNC will step in and say he can't be our candidate. He's not on the ballot. And they will remove him based upon that. And then someone else will come in.
I mean, I think that that is a possibility. Yep. I don't know if these cases will be concluded by the time the elections come around. I can tell you, and I've said this before on television, I've been on different programs on CBS and BBC, and you have these cases which I think are all weak legally. The criminal cases, I think they all have problems. None of them are slam dunks. They are reaches. Even the civil case that he was testifying about yesterday, in court yesterday, I think is a reach on all of these things. But they present peril for him, and it would not surprise me if one of those cases goes to trial and one of those judges puts Trump in jail, right?
Wow,
So I think that, because listen, these guys are they're all want to say, oh, I'm the one who in prison,
right?
They'll go down in history. Right?
Absolutely.
The guy
I took down the big guy. Yep.
Yeah, the day took him down. This prosecutor wants the glory. That judge also wants to be the one that throws the book at Trump. I mean, so, I think he's got logistical hurdles to overcome in order, like, as you put it, on ballot access, but also, having the ability to run. It's going to be difficult if he's in jail. And I think even those people who want to vote for him that are in the middle are going to have a tough time voting for somebody who may be in jail. And ultimately, I think he'll prevail. I think there's a good chance he prevails on cases. But, how long, if somebody puts him in jail, it creates a unique situation that even Teflon Don, may not be able to get out of.
Shelley says, I hope Trump is on the ballot. I won't vote for him, but I hope he makes the ballot. I agree with you, Shelley. I think I think he deserves to be on the ballot. I do. I think he should be on the ballot and let the people decide. I agree with that. And also something else, and this is totally personal for me, right? The idea is that what they're saying, their argument is you can't take him off the ballot because he's proven that people want to vote for him. Right. This is actually an attack on democracy if you do this. Right. So it becomes a political attack. He's already won a presidency. He's winning in the polls. Clearly, Americans want him. So you must allow him to be on the ballot. That's the argument. I hope that argument goes, because that was my argument. Right. That was my argument. My argument here in New York, which they blew off in the Supreme Court. By the way, if you saw, refused to see our case about 3 weeks ago. The Supreme Court said no. So they didn't see our case. Why? Well, because they don't care about Larry Sharpe. But if Trump does it, that becomes precedent. Because I've already had 100,000 people vote for me. I've already had a party. I have proof that New York State wants to vote for me. So if he's on a ballot, I'm on a ballot too. So that is my hope.
Well, what I'm talking about, though, is a different issue, which is, you raised a great issue about ballot access. And if he's off the ballot, will the Republican Party kick him off or put somebody else on? Maybe I can't speak to that. What I can tell you, though, is if he's actually sitting in jail.
Yes.
I think it becomes difficult for him, and even I would not say his most ardent supporters will still vote for him, but the people in the middle are like, what the hell, man?
Yes, I agree.
Give
I
me
think, and
DeSantis.
I was on Dan Abrams 2 weeks ago, and I brought that up. I said that they were like, "Is this ever going to affect him?" And I said, "Yes." In fact, I'm going to post that clip coming up here. And I said, over time, this chips away at him. It does. Over time, constantly seeing him having to be in court, seeing him do this, and also on his own personal psyche. Guy was president of the United States. Now I got to sit here and be interviewed by some lawyer. I'm president of the United States. Who the hell are you? That's how it's going to affect his own psyche, right? And what Trump is good at being in front of a big crowd, riling them up like there's no tomorrow. That's his skill set. If he's got to spend time in court prepping this, maybe even jail, that's time he's not in front of people rallying the crowds. So he's going to have less, he's going to be less effective either way. I completely agree. I think in the long run, these court cases are going to work. I think Democrats are doing exactly the right thing for him. I think it's unethical, but for their goal, it's exactly the right answer. It's the best way to just chip down. So anyway, but for everyone to know, I'm sorry, I've been bad at this. Guys, I've been enjoying the conversation with my friend Vin so much. I've been bad at this. Please click the like button. I haven't told you. I should have told you like 7 times already. So if you haven't clicked that like button, do it now. It's how I get past the algorithms. Please do that. If you're watching on Twitter, please retweet this. It does matter tremendously. The more people who see it, the better. If you want to follow this guy, do so on Instagram at Vinoo Varghese. If you would please check him out there. Also, you can check out all his stuff. All his connections are all there at both Facebook and the YouTube page. You want to check him out? Please do that. Guys on TV all the time. Don't call him too much. He's working. He's busy. So instead, just do some cool social media stuff instead. Do that. It does matter. Please do that. And of course, if you want to support the show, you can. Patreon.com/Sharpway. Throw me $10 a month so I can do more of this and less of my other work I got to do. And of course, if you want to support me getting on the ballot next year, you can. LarrySharp.com/ballot-access to get us to make that happen. So whatever you can do,
I want you on the ballot. So
thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. We are trying our best to make this happen. Absolutely. So yes. Anything else we talk about before we wrap this up?
Well, I just think we've covered a lot today, Larry, and I think that what will happen here is that for the people that don't like you or don't like me, they'll take one clip of this and they will take this out of context. And
I can only hope.
And yes, and so it was funny, when you were talking about the people that will self-censor. Yeah. I am not concerned about that at all. I think the people that are going to self-censor are going to self-censor, and there aren't too many guys like us who are just going to say it like it is, right? And as lawyers are the worst. They're all about censorship. They're the worst when it comes to this, and doctors are the worst when it comes to medicine, right? Because rank and file, they all supported lockdowns and shots, an experimental shot with no proven law, with no long-term studies. Hey, you gotta do this, and if you don't do it, you're a bad guy, and masks that everybody knows they don't work, right? And so they knew that logically, and that's been shown now, but oh no, it's keep this going, keep this thing. You cannot admit when people are asking for forgiveness. There's a whole group out there who thinks that this was what saved America. Locking people down, right?
They still believe it.
Right. And still think hey, there's nothing wrong with telling somebody that, you're going to lose your job if you don't take this experimental shot that the government is telling you to tell. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that this could happen and this could have happened in America. And it did. And I see that lawyers and judges are the ones who are most behind this, giving, carte blanche to the government to do whatever it wanted to do. And, I'm disgusted by my profession. I'm going to bring this up here. The bar says, I got to add one thing, Larry. I had the president of the bar. One of the things I did, and it was a pleasure, and one of the best things that I've done in my career was I represented pro bono a group of school teachers who fought the vaccine mandate, and I represented them pro bono in the Supreme Court. The lawyers who did all the work, these group of lawyers at Staten Island did a great job. but they needed an attorney who was, I'm admitted in the U.S. Supreme Court to argue for them, and I was able to, write a good, that brief and argue and stuff. And we did that pro bono. When I made that announcement, and we sent out a thing to our listserv that we're going to be representing these teachers pro bono in the U.S. Supreme Court, a former president of the Bar Association wrote me and said, "Shame on you."
Yes.
I'm like, what are they like? This guy was older than me, so he's not one of these new guys with this, all this nonsense that's going on in universities. And I'm like, wow, this is how people were scared, and they wanted the government to relieve them of their anxiety.
The part that bothers me, that I'm actually not shocked about, but it does bother me, it's that lawyers and judges are supposed to be the saviors for us. They're supposed to be the people who defend us. They're supposed to be the people who support the people and not the state. They're supposed to be the ones who fight the president and the governor and the assembly. Now they're all one. We don't have anybody. And this is why when someone asked me the other day, about maybe a year ago, they're like, "Hey, Larry, if you run for president, who would you put in the Supreme Court?" And I said, anyone I put in the Supreme Court, there's one litmus test, like one. They must have been a defense attorney. If they were never a defense attorney, they may not be in the Supreme Court. I'm like, why? I said, because defense attorneys know you got to fight the state. They support the people. Defense attorneys support the people. Other attorneys support the state. So you had to have been a defense. If you haven't been a defense attorney, you cannot be in the Supreme Court. That's my view, period. You've got to understand your job is not to support the state. Your job is to fight the state. That's why you're the judge. That's the point. I agree. All right, guys.
I'm with you, Larry, and you're preaching to the choir. So
there we go. Absolutely. Guys, thank you so much for watching tonight. I appreciate all the time you gave me. I will be on again, maybe not tomorrow, I'm not sure, but I'll be on Thursday, twice, Thursday at noon with the Sharp crew. And then with a book author, I'll be on a Thursday at 7 p.m. So twice more this week. I will see you.